And welcome back to our Spring Forward series. On last week's podcast, we had our good friend Megan McNeely on. We're discussing masks and the idea of hiding behind things and, different positions we take in our world of presenting certain looks to the world. And Megan McNeely, a corporate well-being consultant and a wonderful lady, she shared her insightful stories of triumph over several huge obstacles in her life.
Yes, and welcome back this week. We're Poppy and Jeff Spencer, relational experts, and we are so excited today. We have Kelly Christiansen, a 33-year-old senior marketing strategist and columnist for Miss Career Girl. You know what? I've known Kelly all her life, as she's my daughter. And today, Kelly will share her insights on how to deal with a breakup. Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Jeff. I'm thrilled to be here. And I really enjoyed last week's podcast with Megan, sharing how she triumphed over those health issues that she had. That was incredible to hear how she dealt with that. So.
It is, isn't it? It's astounding when people have some of these things that for most folks can be just a crippling and almost stop your life in its tracks and end your life in some cases. And she's completely overcome these things, and it's an incredible story.
And she's like the Energizer Bunny, which I've often called Kelly that too, by the way. But she's just this positivity train that never stops,
Well, and I always thought of like a major health issue. I've had a couple with, tearing a ligament and stuff like that. I always felt like, whoa, this is a huge thing. This is a message from the universe. This is a wake-up call. Someone's trying to reach me. And it seemed, that's why like Megan really resonated with me, because I've had those, similar wake-up messages from the universe. So
Wonderful.
Well, let's start off with one question for our listeners. What do you do first?
Oh, for a breakup, right?
Yes, for a breakup.
So when you're thinking about breaking up or whatever, what's the first thing that you should do?
Well, it's really uncomfortable for me when I first think about it. It's a terrible thought usually. In most of my relationships, they've been wonderful. So usually it's like, I just have a pit in my stomach and a knot in my stomach. So I think the first thing I do is just have that awareness, like, oh, well, what is this? Why am I feeling this way all of a sudden? So I just kind of feel that, awareness, and then
you stay with it, because of course we would say hold on to that. Most people have a tendency to push it away,
just brush it off. Oh, I'm sure it's nothing.
I totally do. So I usually will journal. As you mentioned, Mom, I'm a columnist on Miss Career Girl, and I've been able to translate that into my professional life as well with authoring the thought leadership blog for my firm. But so as a natural writer, I usually journal about it. And I just wrote a column on this yesterday for Miss Career Girl about ignoring my intuition. So I usually do try and push it away. I'm like, put it in the journal and like, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. And then I keep going.
Well, I'm going to talk on this journal thing for just a second too, because this is another one of these great skills of life that a lot of people don't embrace, don't understand, because it's a great way to not right off the very bat, not to brush off these thoughts. Something that's you're thinking about. It can cause that pit in your stomach, as you said. But it's very important to capture these thoughts, because it's something you can go back to and think about and look at yourself and we all struggle with often looking deeply within ourselves and just kind of reflecting about what this really the impact of our lives. We've all gotten brilliant at getting very busy at doing other things, and these little wonderful phones in our hands master that skill of avoidance, absolute distraction. Totally. It's a wonderful distraction.
So one of the things that we had when I was in getting my Master of Science is that one of our professors said to us, embrace the chaos. She was talking about those knots in your stomach and those things. And we all looked at her, kind of screwed up our faces like, what? What is she talking about? And it only, came later that we should actually welcome that into our, it's embracing, it's understanding and respecting the intuition, like you said. And one of the things that, in as big followers of law of attraction, Esther Hicks used to say, we have a GPS. That's our guidance system.
Internal guidance system.
Yeah, within ourselves. And, what's the first thing that happens when you veer off your track? What does the GPS say in your car?
Rerouting.
Rerouting.
At your first available...
Do a U-turn.
At your first available street, you should make a U-turn. So it's the same, kind of thing, is that we have this internal GPS. So yes, let's use it.
And back to that, just the other thing I always loved about the law of attraction, how she described it, the idea of paddling upstream versus letting go of the oars for a while. We talked about this, and I think in a podcast a few back, but letting those oars go and letting that boat follow the stream and just go with it instead of always paddling upstream against what you feel is right.
Right. So the first step that you said was acknowledging, accepting, understanding that you have this knot, this pit in your stomach.
Yeah. And for me, the journaling is really what step one. Journaling helps me to get all those feelings inside me because it's really overwhelming for me. I'm a very emotional type of person. So for me, journaling helps to like quiet down that overwhelming feelings and then really help to legitimize what I'm feeling. So I've got that on paper. So for me, that's like step one, is just to like legitimize what I'm feeling.
And that happens for everybody. Whenever we are feeling emotional overwhelm and we're doing that, whenever we get out of that right brain and into the left brain that is rational and it sorts and organizes in our left brain, and certainly any kind of writing or art therapy, as I used to do, is a great way to do that. Making lists even is a great way to help sort out those emotional and sort of diminish them from overcoming us. Mm-hmm. So go ahead. So the first thing to deal with a breakup, how do you deal with that? You journal first, all right, and then whom do you tell or talk to either before the breakup, or do you keep that to yourself, or even after?
Yeah, is this something you bounce off of others, family, friends, or do you just kind of move forward on your own?
Or do you keep it to yourself? I mean, what would your advice be for our listeners? Mm-hmm. And then maybe even after that, who should you not tell?
Yeah. So those are really good questions. And for me, I'm young. However, I, as you know, I was married and divorced. And so, and speaking of masks, boy, was I great at pretending like everything was fine in that relationship, when under the water, it was frantic paddling to try and keep everybody happy and try and keep things going. And I really lost, I lost my way in a relationship. So I think, as far as telling people, in certain cases, I didn't tell anyone because I had been pretending like everything was fine, and trying to stay afloat when I wasn't. So, I would say, I definitely talk to you, Mom. And I certainly talk with my siblings. I'm really close with my siblings, but as far as friends and even shared friends of previous boyfriends or previous people I'm dating, I don't talk to them. It's certainly not my news to tell in the case of friends of a boyfriend, and I don't really talk to my girlfriends until I can be with them face to face. I feel like on social media so much can just get blown out of proportion, and people can, it's like, oh, this is newsworthy. And I don't know. I tend to keep these things really to myself and really only sharing with my mom and dad and siblings. Mm-hmm.
So real quick, just you mentioned social media. So what do you do to change your relationship status on social media? When should that be changed? When should it not? I mean, it's kind of a slippery slope.
We kid around about that when someone starts dating and says, so are you Facebook official? I mean, are you telling the planet yet? Or?
Yeah. So what do you do on social media sites?
In the case of a breakup, I think, again, I just keep that like really private. So there's not I'm not running home on Facebook and saying I'm single, like announcing it to the world. I just don't do that.
Right.
Other people do, and that's okay for them. That's the message they want to share. For mine, I think Facebook has it where you can make your whole relationship status just private so no one can see it regardless. And then it's just kind of a non-issue. And people will find out, like I said, when I see them in person, it's really just a better way for me to have those interpersonal relationships, is just to be able to communicate.
I imagine
face-to-face.
a guy taking as I always do, the guy's position here in perspective. I think a lot of guys often run out, and especially if they've been the one jilted here,
the dumpee,
they might run in quickly, to tell the world that they're available because they need to have that bruised ego, reaffirmed. And
yeah, and I've been, I've been dumped, and I've been the dumpee before, and it's awful. I think, from a macro level, like no matter which side you're on, breakups are terrible.
They are.
Here's someone who you thought you were going to spend your life with, and then,
or at the very least, cared very much about.
Yeah, and cared and loved, and so I think they're awful no matter what side you're on, and I don't know if this was one of your questions for later, but just to talk about being the dumpee in one relationship, when I was dumped, it was almost like he, we've been dating, and he didn't know how to tell me that it was ending. So he just like went radio silence. And
we talked about that. We were going to talk about ghosting.
Yeah.
And is that ever acceptable? Is ghosting ever acceptable?
I mean, not if you've been going out for a couple weeks or whatever.
I would say categorically no, it is not. It is purely the coward's way out as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
If you don't have the courage
so listen up, guys. No ghosting.
I mean, I think it's fine for someone who, with whom you've just met or something like that. But if you've been dating someone for months, don't ghost them. And then, in my case, I was getting mixed messages. So after the relationship ended, he was like stalking me on social media and going to the same concerts and like trying to text me and hang out with me. And I was like, no, we're broken up now. So I think there's a maturity level that comes with breakups too, is like, just do not go back and forth and send those mixed messages once you have had a conversation and decided to end the relationship.
So we've had several clients that have had this thing where one of our clients is a dumpee, and we coached him to get some closure with his gal that he was dating for about 4 or 5 months, and because she started to ghost. And what happened is that he made I statements. We coach him to make I statements when you're breaking up, with that person. And what happened is that she said, no, I'm not interested. I don't want you. And then he, of course, pulled back completely, 100%. And she's still texting him, snapping him, and all that. So we just wondered, do you think it's about just wanting attention no matter what? Is that what this other ex-partner's MO is?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think either way, at the end of the relationship, no matter which side you're on, it's back to that ego thing. And your ego's bruised no matter what. Something failed. And so you still want to have those little boosts.
Even though she broke up with him, she still wants that attention.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, with the snapping and stuff like that, like if you're still getting those messages from the other person, you could set healthy boundaries and expectations, depending on, if they are, a little more immature or something like that, you could just tell them like, hey.
So yeah, he said, I'm just not responding. I'm just ignoring them.
And that sends a message too.
Right. But it kind of gets under his skin a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Of
It's
course.
just, it's sending that message and getting confusing, ideas. So
this idea of the bruised ego, that's one of the things. And we can go all the way back to your breakup with me, Pops, back in college days, and that was based on miscommunication. But I know I personally was in a position where I just, at that very young and very immature, age of 21, didn't have all the skills and didn't have the courage just to say, well, wait a second, this doesn't seem reasonable. My ego got stepped on, and I ran out with my tail between my legs and didn't move forward.
Even though I was saying, wait, come back. We both misunderstood. He was like, no, I'm out of here.
So how do you cope with these feelings? And I guess we can get back to our patented tool here, the trademark tool, the emotional clock. We always like to deal with this and look at the feelings, because one of the things I think always happens, and many of the things we've just been discussing are essentially often ignoring those feelings.
Right.
You know,
and the intuition.
Not listening to that gut, you know, that first thing where you feel a little confusion and anxiety. That's the 1 and 2 o'clock settings where your gut's saying something's wrong here. And you can actually, go all the way to despair and still not say anything and keep moving your way around this clock. But you finally, and this is where the breakups finally happen, when you get through all these emotions and you realize you have to do something, you're at 6 o'clock. And this is one of those moments where you kind of have to make I have to address this somehow, and I'm either going to within myself say, let's make this work, or you've already passed that, and you can't make it work. It's beyond that. You're saying, gosh, I think I'm at that point. I need to break up. I need to make this news. So, I know. Do you remember that feeling?
I do, and I think in the studio, I think it's great that you have this emotional clock up on the wall here, because
we have a huge version, folks, in the studio.
Yeah, it's a huge version, and I bounce around through all of those emotions, certainly feeling shame and guilt. And then, anxiety and despair, what will happen next? What will become of me? What will my new habits and patterns on the weekends and everything like that be? And what about the other person? And so just, feeling all these really negative, scary emotions. And I think you have to feel them. And so many times, I'm going to just own up and be honest about it. I have numbed out my emotions, and I have just drank too much, or, just had sex. Sorry, Mom, earmuffs. But people numb out in a lot of ways: eating, alcohol, sex, whatever. And it's just a way of numbing out and not feeling your emotions. So I would just say, feel your feelings. Just feel them, even if it's hard and painful.
One of the things that we got from our experience last week with Jack Canfield in California, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy, one of our colleagues at our mastermind group shared something that was a wonderful concept that so many of us see today, and that is comfortably numb. We've
Totally.
become so complacent in our detachment that we become comfortably numb, and it becomes a habit, a way of life, a pattern, and we don't even know that it's happening.
In fact, the thing I've talked about, and I'm going to talk about again, when we have this marvelous new tool that makes it so convenient. All we have to do is look down at this little phone in our hand, and boy, if you can't find distraction there, there's this, you can either be texting someone, looking something up, an app, Facebook all day long, and on and on and on. There's no lack of things to keep you distracted. In fact, we see this all the time, and it always seems tragic to us. We were all out to dinner last night, a little celebratory dinner, but it was nice to be able to be talking amongst ourselves. And I look around so many other tables and couples that are out together, or families, and half of them are looking at phones and they're not talking to each other. And it's so important to put those things down and actually look and talk and communicate and get all these things out, to share all the goods and the bads.
And I think, after you've let yourself feel your feelings, and, called a friend or a family member, and maybe you talk through it,
and journal.
But one of the things I did is, to really close the chapter of a previous relationship, is I went to therapy, and I talked to a professional, and someone outside my family, outside my circle, someone objective who could, again, just legitimize the experiences I had, and said, just a third party is telling me, oh, that must have been really hard for you. And that really helped me close the chapter and, feel my feelings, and then take away from that some strategies on how to move forward, and how to just move forward in a healthier way with dealing with my emotions, observing them objectively. She took me through dialectical behavior therapy.
Talk more about what that is for people who might not understand that, please.
Sure. I wrote a column about it briefly on Miss Career Girl, but basically there's this acronym, I think, Dear Man, and it stands for, describe, and you probably know it, but
express.
Yeah, you go through and you describe, very objectively, I want you to, do this. I'm worried about it because of this, and you just like reinforce your position on something very, very objectively. So Dear Man is the DBT acronym, and it's just a way to get away from your emotions and communicate very clearly what it is, you're trying to say.
Right. And just because Kelly mentioned a great thing, obviously we would not, give coaching to our children, but we would always refer people to therapy if they need that next step, and if they need something more than what coaching or counseling can give them.
And in fact, we've a couple different times where people have considered coaching and working with us, and we can see that there are a lot of these deep-seated things that they have not dealt with.
Or there's addiction or some other mental illness, and then we refer them to another professional.
Because they're really, if you haven't dealt with these deep-seated things, be it emotions, be it other addiction issues, you have to deal with these things first before you can even consider any kind of moving forward with a coaching environment, because these things will always be in the way.
Yeah, I mean, if you have depression or anxiety that starts to really impact your everyday life, then yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so we're in our Spring Forward series here, and how to break up. So after you've gone to therapy, after you've journaled, you've gone to therapy, what would be another way to spring forward?
I'm always looking for ideas. And so, of course, I did some internet research. It's so easy, as you said, Jeff, to have, that resource at your fingertips. And another idea I got from Gretchen Rubin's Happier podcast, she shared something from her daughter. Her daughter likes to go to the art museum and just walk around and be inspired by all these other ancient times of turmoil and conflict. And it's like, well, we made it to where we are today. So, they got out, or they got through that. So she found inspiration in art. For me, I'm a very active person. I really enjoy being outside, even living in Wisconsin. So just being active, going outside, going for a walk, making plans with friends, things like that. So I'm not distracting myself from my feelings. I've already kind of dealt with them. And then a healthy next step to move forward is just to do something social and to get out.
Just the idea of movement. We talk about moving forward. Movement itself is always such a critical aspect of dealing with things and getting things moving. It's going for that walk. This happens with Poppy and I all the time, and we're often talking about a topic and trying to figure out solutions for something, or writing something that we're looking for new inspirations. Often just the physical motion, getting up and taking a step somewhere to do something. You go out, get the mail, whatever that little motion might be. Often you come back with, what, I got a great idea. How many times has this happened to us where we come back? For
me, it's like in the shower or first waking up in the morning, I get those little creative ideas. But there's definitely, when I was a psychology professor, there's definitely a physiological response here that we get when we are actually in motion. Our bodies are in motion. We stimulate new thought and new emotions and new ideas.
Mm-hmm. And something I worked on, that I've been working on, throughout my life, of course, is just self-care. So, if you haven't been, treating yourself to an Epsom salts bath or whatever throughout your relationship, I would encourage, your listeners to make sure to reintroduce that self-care, or getting a massage, or taking a nice bath, or reading a book. Those were things that a long time ago I just completely stopped doing for myself, and made a very conscious effort conscious thought to make sure that I continue those while in a relationship, because I think a lot of times we can lose ourselves in relationships. So if you haven't been doing those things, like, reintroduce them again.
And your point about, not taking care of yourself, I think one of the things that that you saw in yourself, we saw, is that you put everything into the other person. You're often so focused on, I need to put so much to the other person. If there's dynamics that are off, you're trying to often fill up that lack with saying, well, I'll just keep putting more into the relationship and less in myself.
So you give away your energy to the other person who may be down a quart. I used to say that about energy. It's like, oh, someone's energy is down a quart. That's okay. That's what I used to do too, is I'd be the cheerleader, like that. I will raise that person up. Well, obviously we know that you can't make another person, happy unless they choose to be happy. I mean, happiness and all of those positive emotions are choices. I mean, that's how we feel.
Which is one of the ways, kind of going back to where a lot of relationships fail, is a lot of people ignore these things very early on in a relationship, where they see someone is lacking or different in some way. There's an assumption for anyone who's often young relationships see this happen, where they say, oh, that's okay. I can raise them up to my level. I can change that. I can add to that. I can. That's not going to be a problem. I know I've done that as well.
And that's a challenge for someone who, like you, is such a giver, because sometimes it's hard to find that fine line where you are not giving too much of yourself away, right?
That's really something I've struggled with. And I've written about it before, people pleasing. And, we love, people pleasers love to make other people, try and do things for other people. And it is definitely a challenge, and something to make that conscious thought and choice to work on.
Yeah, I'm in the presence of two world-class people pleasers here too. They're
So here's the thing. It's like, reframe the way you think about it. If you stop giving so much to others, please do not feel shame and guilt about that and feel like, oh, now I'm being selfish because I'm taking time for myself. It's okay. It's the old oxygen mask in the cabin on the airplane. You have to put it on yourself first. And so if
that was written for mothers, by the way, I'm sure, I'm sure any guy would grab it and quickly start doing it. Mothers go, I got to save my baby first.
If you had your kid that you would
I
do
know,
it.
I'm just kidding.
But here's the thing. It's like we sometimes we don't see when we're being depleted of that. So I don't know. Do you have any ideas for how to recognize that? Does it come through in the journaling? When do you first start to see it tilt towards, I'm giving too much of myself?
Well, usually, again, like we talked about at the beginning with Megan, it's like that message from the universe guaranteed to reach me. So, in previous relationships, I tore my ACL, I've gotten pneumonia, I've come down with a horrible cold. And it's like the body is like, hello, trying to get out. Yeah. It's like, what's with all these serious illnesses, So
you've had a few of those too, Pops.
Oh, yeah. A long time ago. Yes. In old relationships, I depleted myself, I'm sure,
Yeah, so I think the challenge for me, moving forward with wanting to have healthy relationships is just being aware of it, and then really honing my thoughts so that I can be just more conscious about my default behavior and try and make it, more healthy behavior.
Well, one of the things that, and Kelly has her Myers-Briggs assessment, and she knows what she is. And one of the second ones are either sensors or intuition. And you're kind of on the borderline. You don't have a clear preference for one or the other. And as Myers-Briggs certified facilitator, you can actually develop those other aspects of your personality that are not as clear in a preference for the others. So that was one suggestion that we, that you learned along the way. It's like, okay, you just wrote about it in your Miss Career Girl. And listeners, you can find that on misscareergirl.com. It's mscareergirl.com.
Yeah.
You can find that article, but it's...
Kelly's a great writer. We always love reading her stuff.
Yes.
They're biased, but...
No, we're not biased.
We know good writing.
Yes.
Okay, so... what's the, how do you actually have the breakup talk? I mean, let's say you're the one breaking up. Mm-hmm. How do you have that talk? How do you approach it? How do you start it? From my experience,
this takes great courage. This is a really scary thing.
With other clients, when they've said, well, should I text them? We're like, no, do not do that. If you can do it in person to person, that's the best, right?
Yeah. And I think just coming from a place of, confusion and all those emotions on the confusion, anxiety, despair, I think really owning those feelings and sitting with them is really hard to do because it's just so uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, it's not something that's scripted. Breakup talks are always just uncomfortable. I feel like there's no right way, honestly. I mean, there's just not. It's just, and I'll take the compliment. Like, I'm a great writer. I'm a horrible speaker.
You are not. You're a good speaker.
Well, I feel like it always comes out wrong in a jumbled mess. But, I would just say, like, you need to speak from the heart, face to face, and just say what you're feeling. And
so one of the things that we learned along the way is that we gave to our, we coach our clients, is that, like, your worst fear, you put it right out there on the table and say, I don't think there's any way I can say this better, and I hope it doesn't come off as a jumbled mess, but please bear with me. This isn't working for me. Is that something that you've ever done?
Yeah, definitely. Or, a long time ago in a previous relationship, I think I used the words like, I need to leave this relationship in order to be a better version of myself. So it was really more about me and not about the other person. Mm-hmm. And I know there's like funny memes like, it's not you, it's me, or whatever. But, in this case, that really was true. I was no longer able to be like honoring and true to myself in the relationship.
This is one of these tearing off the Band-Aid things. People, what's the best way to do it? Really fast or really slowly? It's always going to rip out hair and hurt no matter what you do. And I know as we all have, I've done this too, having to go through a breakup, and it's one of those things you just absolutely have to follow your heart. And speak from your heart. This is one of those things we always get back to. One of the most important things to be doing in a relationship, even at the end of one and a breakup, you have to speak from your heart, because if not, all you're doing is just putting on a mask again, and you're pretending to be doing something else that isn't true to yourself, and denying yourself the opportunity to be all the best versions of yourself, and your I statements that you went back to as well. We so often, it's very easy for us to not take accountability, not be responsible within ourselves for what's going on, but to shift blames and say, well, you do this and you do that, so I can't be in this relationship. No, has to get back to you, and it's on me. I need to be doing this. I need to be best of myself. So that's I think you're very good at that.
Yeah, and something that came up when I was talking with another family member about my age, we've both had experiences where, people outside the relationship don't know the intricacies and the day-to-day of your relationship at all. So,
especially if you've been good with masks.
Right. And so we've both had the experience where someone says, oh, you guys broke up. He was so great. He was so wonderful. And it's like, yes. And it turned out not to be the right fit for me. And so I think dealing with that, dealing with other people telling you, you're wrong, you're making a mistake.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say
other people like disapproving of your decision can be really tough. And I think just
go back to journaling. What do?
You just really have to know yourself, and you have to know that in your gut you're making the right decision, and it's okay for them to say, to want what's best for you, even if they don't know what's best for you. I think if you can kind of read between the lines, they're like, oh, we thought this was a good thing for you. They just want you to be happy. So I think realizing that instead of feeling like they're coming at you is helpful too.
So you detach from it a little bit, and you pull back a little bit and don't take it personally.
Right, because their perception of the relationship and their understanding is completely different from yours.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I think just having that awareness is really helpful. It's okay that they love the other person too. It's just, it's not what's going to be in your future. So
I think one of the great questions, about how to do the breakup. What's the worst way to do the breakup? I mean, what you've seen it probably both ways.
Yeah. Not just ghosting the other person.
Ghosting doesn't work.
That's bad. I think phone and text are bad.
Mm-hmm.
I think face-to-face is the best way. And then
it's the hardest way too. I mean,
sure.
People. One of the reasons I think people like to do is something like over text is because they don't have to have that. If let's say you're a guy telling a girl who really cares about you, you don't want to have that sobbing person in front of you that you have to try to deal with and console at the same time you're trying to break up. That's can be a very awkward thing.
So what happens when the dumpee, the prospective dumpee, is pleading and begging, no, please give us a chance. I want you back, or I don't want to break up, and you're the most important thing to me, or far worse, and we've heard this too, I don't want to live my life without you. I might even take my life. Mm-hmm. I mean, those threats have happened.
I can't live without you.
I can't live without you. I'm just, and they threaten you back with an ultimatum. I don't know that you have any experience with that, but certainly people.
We know others
that have had that.
Yeah, I think. So what's the question?
The question is what do you do when the other party is pleading with you? And possibly even threatening, I might take my life. I might commit suicide.
I think you really need to make sure then that their network, their mom or their friends or whatever are looped in at that point, because that sounds really serious. And that person needs some attention from their loved ones and from their tribe for sure. And then I think it's important to listen to the other person. So you do need to hear them out. You do need to think about it. Maybe they are saying something that you haven't yet considered. So I would be, honoring them and listening to them and taking that time to hear them out. It's respectful to do that. And once you have done that, I think you just, again, need to check in with yourself and see, how that feels. Is couples counseling something I want to do? Is this something that's going to be what's best for me? Does this feel right? Does this feel like relief? If it doesn't, you probably back to your square one decision. Mm-hmm. But I know you guys have talked about that, and with the Esther Hicks thing, she says reach for the best feeling thought or something like that.
Best feeling or thought. Yep.
The next best feeling. Right?
Yeah, the next best feeling. So if I think you just need to check in and see what that is based on what they've communicated to you.
Well, and I think you mentioned it before on our emotional clock. We have 4 o'clock as our shame and guilt setting, and so often when you're the one breaking up, there's a multitude of feelings of shame and guilt. And then we just go back to your process that you mentioned, to journal, to reach out to friends, maybe go to counseling or coaching or therapy, whatever it is, to recalibrate kind of your emotional.
And when you circle back, you typically almost always find yourself right back where you were. It's like, yes, I do feel some guilt about what I've done, but it still was the right thing to do. It doesn't, decision. Even if it's hard and you feel badly about it, it's still the right thing.
And I think one bounces around through those different, the 5 stages of grieving or whatever. Mm-hmm. You bounce around through those for a while. It doesn't just, if you're not numbing out, it doesn't just go away. You feel those emotions, sadness that it's over and all those things. So I think you still feel those for a while.
And everybody's different. It's timing,
yeah.
And speaking of timing, so we're in our Spring Forward series here. When should somebody spring forward and start dating again after they've ended a relationship? And let's just for the sake of this conversation, make it a 6-month to longer time period.
Yeah.
When
should the relationship was, or the breakup?
Ex relationship was 6 to 2 years, let's say.
Yeah.
When should someone start dating again?
Well, according to Charlotte on Sex and the City, it takes half the time you dated someone to get over them. So you could go by that formula. So half the time. I think when you feel like you have really closed that chapter. So for me, it in a previous relationship, it took a while because I spent like 2 years post-relationship not really dealing with it, just kind of in a free fall. And then I finally
like that. You call it your breakup free fall?
Yeah, your post-divorce or your post-breakup free fall. So yeah, just not really dealing with it, not knowing how, not being equipped to deal with it. And then once I did, process it and go through it and really close that chapter, then I felt quote unquote ready. So I think it's going to be different for everyone. And once you feel like you have, for me, I'm always like, oh, what have I learned? What have I enjoyed? What's been wonderful? What are some things I need to work on? And I really need to like go through that process for myself in order to feel like, okay, I got it. I know,
So you're a big proponent of introspection, right? Self-examination, looking within.
Yes, because I think we're not in a static world. It's a ever-changing world, and just being able to move forward with those changes is really important.
I think it's also important to know. I look at myself after divorce. Often there's a lot of things that you're just kind of lost too. You've kind of lost yourself in a lot of these processes. You're not sure what you're good at anymore. The things that you felt you were good at or you felt good about yourself are often very depleted things. They've gotten lost because of that whole process. And it often takes a while, and you often have to refocus on yourself and the things that made you feel good about yourself in the past, and bring yourself back up to realize that, yeah, I am okay. I'm all right, and I can get back on that horse of dating and relationships again. And but it is important. I think we all have to sort those things out first. That's always the case. You always have to kind of get yourself feeling good again and feel good about yourself before you can launch off to try to feel good about someone else.
Yeah, you have to be okay first.
And I think a lot of times people use social media as that external validation. Mm-hmm. So when you aren't like able to fill up your own tank, you're like posting selfies all the time and, posting on social media a lot to get that validation. And that could be even like a gentle reminder for yourself, like, oh, how else can I fill up my tank? Can I go to yoga this week? Can I call a friend and meet for drinks after work or whatever it is? How can you kind of feed yourself without looking outside?
Mm-hmm. One of our colleagues last week that we met was a young millennial, a guy at the mastermind retreat at Jack Canfield's home. And he suggested that, he said, when we want to get to talking just a little bit about online dating, Tinder, Bumble, eHarmony, Match, whatever it is. He spoke about, he said so many people are using that external validation that you just talked about as even more superficial than he said a lot of times people will go to post pictures on Instagram and they will just go to a trendy spot even though they're not going to the gallery, going to the restaurant. They just post outside and then go home and go, hey, I was here at this, I'm here at the Ritz hotel for a gala. And it was like, they weren't there for the gala, but they post the selfies. It's like, that's just so disheartening. What do you think? Are you familiar with that?
That's new to me.
It must be a California thing. Yeah. You lived in California.
Yeah, that sounds very Hollywood. I think that's sad. I really do.
Really
I think that's sad because if instead, okay, so maybe
talking about masks again.
Yeah, like maybe he couldn't afford to go to the gala. Maybe he could go to like a comedy club or something else and like, again, like nourish his soul or his spirit and post from there. That would be, in my mind, a better win-win. Exactly. More authentic. But
no, that was just
gave me something to think about.
That just blew my mind. It was like, wow, you're really going to do that.
Let's just pretend we're all these things we're not.
Okay. So how about Tinder, Bumble? I mean, is there Match, eHarmony? I know all those different dating sites have different applications. What do you think?
I was on a few years ago. I was on some of those. I think I was on Match, and because I was like, oh, this is this is more, you have to pay for it. It'll be better than the free apps and, cream of the crop type of thing. And a lot of times online, people are not their true selves.
Right.
And they are lying about their jobs or whatever. So I think you really...
The pictures are old.
Yeah. Old pictures, lying about jobs. A lot of, people are joking like, oh, I got catfish. Like people are posting pictures of themselves when they were 100 pounds lighter or whatever, so it's just like, I think with online, you got to like take it with a grain of salt. And I mean, it can be a good way to meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet. Maybe you live in different cities or something like that. So it can be great for that, just to, be able to make plans with someone who seems like they might be a good match, that you wouldn't normally meet, in your work home destinations. But I think you just have to know that, okay, this is someone I didn't meet, through friend or someone that I knew from school or whatever. So you just have to take it with a grain of salt.
So do people do they share their Tinder or Bumble prospects with their friends, their tribe? Do they share them and go, what do you think? Do they do that? I don't know.
I think so. I mean, I think when you have roommates and stuff, that would definitely be happening. I don't right now, but I mean, if I did, I would totally show, my girlfriends and stuff like, oh, what do you think about this person? And have you heard of them? Or, just try to get a little more like quote unquote background. Cause, I heard something else in last week about, online dating where when you see someone's pictures, you start to make up a story in your head about them.
Yes.
And it's like, that's just like you based on this 2-dimensional interaction with this person's pictures. Right. You don't know them. Cell phone. Yeah. I mean, they could have a lisp. They could, you don't.
Yeah, don't fill in too many blanks.
There's a lot of nonverbals that you don't get until you meet someone. Mm-hmm. So the sooner you meet them, probably the better.
Okay.
Or talk on the phone or, just to try and increase the number of signals you can get from them.
So let's say you're out on a date, a first date, second date, or third date. When should you, and you're sort of interested in this person, when should you bring in your past relationships and talk about your exes?
That's a really good question, because I think that's going to tie back into the, what have you learned from your relationship? Have you closed that chapter? I think when you do bring that up, or they bring it up, it's a good way to find out, like, if they've recovered and if they've, like, quote, healed. And hopefully that past relationship has helped them get more clear on what they want and what's a good fit for them. So I think as you start to get to, as you're dating someone and you start to get to know them, you have to get to that like transparent, vulnerable place where you talk about it. I don't think it's first date material personally. But after you've been dating someone for a month or so, it's definitely bound to come up, and I think it should come up. So you can kind of gauge where they're at, in terms of their past experience and their learnings.
I think that's really good.
Well, let's kind of change gears a little bit here, because we've talked about, your personal relationships. Another kind of breakup that happens, of course, in your professional life, in your workplace. And this is a dynamic. We've seen a lot of this being a challenge with millennials. And we've had discussions about this. I think some of our podcasts, we've talked about it. If you don't have good coping skills and can't deal with challenges, sometimes, quitting or leaving is the easiest way to deal with something versus discussing it. But how do you deal with a workplace breakup? I know you've had that happen in your life as well. So
yeah, I've certainly left great positions at great marketing agencies for new opportunities. And the first thing that I do is just keep quiet. And when I know that I'm going to be leaving, I don't tell anyone. I wait until I tell my supervisor or my, HR, my boss, whatever, because that's just respectful, and you don't want word to get around. So yeah, once you're walking in to give your 2 weeks or your month or whatever your resignation is, I think you just need to be really respectful, and you're not going to say, well, I didn't like this, or no, because they're going to ask you. I think HR has some policy that they need to report what you say in the exit interview. So I think, this isn't a time to be to be sharing your gripes about whatever you didn't like about the company. It's really just a time to give constructive feedback, and then to again just demonstrate your appreciation for them.
It's a lot of this is very similar to what goes on in the reasons you get to breaking up. It's things within yourself. Your gut is telling you you're getting that knot in your stomach. It's a lot of the same process, and a lot of the same principles apply as to when you're doing it with a relationship. It doesn't fit the same values. There's a lot of things you just don't jive with. So not too dissimilar overall.
Yeah, and you definitely don't want to burn any bridges.
No.
Your new job is going to ask you for professional references, and I recently took a new opportunity a couple months ago, and my references were from over 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite clients, with whom I'm still in contact with today, was one of my references, and we're still in touch. We don't work together at all anymore, but I think just not burning bridges is so huge.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really a good point. Well, we have loved having Kelly here for a wonderful visit and sharing. And we hope you listeners have enjoyed hearing Kelly. And you can find her at...
You can find me on Twitter at Kelly M as in Michelle C247. So Kelly MC247, and you can chat with me there. I'd love to hear your feedback.
And you can read her articles at misscareergirl.com. That's mscareergirl.com.
And of course, you can find Poppy and I at relationalexperts.com. We love to hear from you. Love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear ideas for future shows, because we come up with lots, but we want to hear what you want to hear about. So
right. And you can, just jot us an email or an inquiry or comment about today's show of how to deal with a breakup with Kelly. And next week, I think we're going to be talking about heart-healthy fitness conversations and how that mind, body, spirit works. And we're going to be sharing with all three of us have personal trainers, and we're going to be sharing some insights with you all next week in our Spring Forward.
Okay. And so until then, we appreciate your listening, and thank you for being a part of the podcast.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.